Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're doing our Essen 2022 preview. If you're unfamiliar with this, Essen 2022 is happening in October this year. It's going to have a variety of new games, and a lot of these games look super interesting. If you aren't aware, there is a full list of all of the games over on BGG, and you can go take a look at those games yourselves. I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can follow along, or you can take a look at all of the new releases yourself. So I'm very, very excited to share all of these games I'm interested in, and I'm going to split up the video into two different parts. My first 5 or 6 games or so are all going to be games that I have no idea how to play, and then my other 6 or 5 different games are going to be ones that I actually have experience playing. So I think there will be something that you can take away from this that will actually be beneficial. The first part of our list, though, is going to be all those games that I have not played, so I'm not extremely informed on how the game actually plays and the actual review side of it, but I can tell you some things about the gameplay and what kind of ideas they're bringing to the table. So the first game that I want to talk about here is Space Kraken. Space Kraken, when I saw this game, I didn't know much about it. I had seen the name on Kickstarter before. It was something that I had chosen not to back, and I think I'm actually regretting it a little bit, and luckily there's a late pledge option for this. So Space Kraken bids itself as a solo experience, but it can play all the way up to 4-player, and when you play 4-player, it turns to a 1 versus all game. When you play with 2 or 3, it does become a cooperative game. So I saw this, and I think that sounds a little bit interesting, but I think the main concept here is that it is a solo first game. After checking the Kickstarter page, I got an idea of what the game actually looks like. Now, the game itself is played in a book. So you're going to be opening up this book in front of you, and the book is going to be full of these almost like a choose your own adventure. The idea is it's a roguelike game. This means that it's going to have a map and exploration, combats, characters, items. Everything that you explore is going to be generated by this AI system that was used to create the book. So every time you flip a page of the book, it's going to lead you to something new. I think that this is a really smart idea, particularly for the solo audience, because everything is contained in that book and it's already been done. You as the player are not going to have to be putting any of that work into actually creating this AI or setting up the different scenario. It's there in the book already, and all you're going to have to do is flip to different pages. In addition, the playtime is pretty dang short, and the fact that you're going to be able to set up a session, all of the information is there, and it's all self-contained in that book. That's something that really interests me. So I'm very excited to try this out. Let's take a look quickly at the books themselves, and you can still late pledge this. This might be an option for you. I realistically am probably going to late pledge this after looking at the information. It just seems really cool. So start off with you got the core book itself, you open it up, and it's going to have sessions for your crew. And as mentioned before, since it's the procedurally generated setting, you're going to have your crew, and based on who you choose, that's going to lead to the different weapons, items that you could obtain. It's going to take you into areas for exploration. So there's 2 different modes of solo play as well. You can go into like this mini campaign section, or you can have these one-shot scenarios, which I also think is a great approach. And then lastly, you have combat, which is all in that one area as well. You're not going to be flipping back from multiple pages. It's in that section, and based on the results of the combat, you move on. This sounds amazing. I think it's very innovative with the way that the book is working, and it looks like you're actually going to be able to write into the book as well, and I think that's also really smart. So a giant dry erase book that has that spiral bound side that you're going to be flipping towards. This sounds like an experience that's worth checking out, and sounds like it's something very different than anything else on the market. So that is Space Kraken, and I cannot wait to try this one. I am really thinking of going and finding a way to light back this. So pretty excited here. Next up, we have Woodcraft. So Woodcraft is my number 2 most excited game, and the biggest thing here is the design team behind it. So this is a Delicious Games product, and this one looks like a interesting take on contract fulfillment. So a lot of the Vladimir Suhi co-designs here, the last one, Messina 1347, was one that I wasn't super impressed with. It seemed that there were a lot of little things going on, and the first half of the game didn't seem that interesting to me, unfortunately. It was in the later parts of the game where you're really getting those strong actions. But Woodcraft here looks like there is some interesting stuff going on throughout. The biggest thing that is leading towards this is the action wheel system. It uses this from Praga Caput Regni, a game that I really love, as the entire game is interesting. This one here, it has a larger version of that wheel with a bit more of an interesting choice on the different actions that you're going to be taking. So you're going to pluck out one of those tiles and you'll move it along, and then you'll get an associated bonus if it's further back. And the further back it is, the more of an incentive there is to take that action. But you are locked. You cannot take future actions until some of the ones in the back have been cleared, but you can use different resources and tools to mitigate that or replicate different actions. The other thing that I talked about already was the contract fulfillment in this game. Vladimir Sui hasn't really done a lot of games, at least in recent years that I've played, that use this. Underwater Cities is all about that engine building. You have some goals that you're going for, but nothing is driven for those small points throughout the game through fulfilling contracts. But I think that this one looks very interesting, as not only are you going to be planning for the future using resources like planting trees, collecting dice, but you're also going to get assistants that are going to change potential values of these contracts. So I think this is a great way to get some engine building in this game, because it's going to change and modify those different ways that you're able to complete these contracts. So I think that's a cool idea here. You have the solid action system from Praga. You've got a variety of different options and the assistants that you can hire in your own personal board. The game is split up into phases where you can invest in your own trees and have those planned and then get resources later on, and then wrapped around this contract fulfillment mechanism. So I'm excited to try this one. I think the aesthetic is very pretty. Honestly, the graphic design and layout reminds me a lot of Messina 1347. It's just missing that core interaction of the board. So we'll see if the interaction that exists with the action spaces and the competition for these different goods in the center is enough to make this one truly an interactive experience, or if it's going to be a similar line, like something like I don't even have a good one here. Maybe Praga. I would say Praga is probably the most multiplayer solitaire one that I've played in a while. I feel like Pulsar has some good competition. Underwater Cities has good competition. So this one probably seems actually like it's the most multiplayer solitaire out of all of them that I've seen. So those are some of the more recent ones, but I'm still very excited for this. I trust this studio. Most of the games have been pretty dang good. My next game here is Atiwa, and this is another designer I really trust. This is Uwe Rosenberg. The theme of this one is you are going to be farming, but you're using bats to do so. Now, the core gameplay in this one that makes it different than the other games is the fact that you're going to be creating worker spots in front of you, and these worker spots are going to expand as you play. I love this idea, and I hope that it's enough to bring it above something like Hallertau. If you're not familiar, Hallertau is one of my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games, and this one in particular, instead of having action cards that you're going to be playing, you're going to be collecting action cards from the center of the board and then placing them in your own grid in front of you. During the worker phase of this game, you'll send a worker to the main board, and then you'll take a bat action phase. Such a fun name for an action phase. You'll get to use your bat tokens and place them in your personal private board. So you're having two different layers of worker placement, the central one where you're competing with others, and then your own private one that you're going to get to build throughout the game. The other important thing about this one is when you place your different personal worker spaces, where you place them really does matter. It's going to allow you to escalate the actions based on the terrain that's around them. And I think that's a great idea. The fact that you are constantly thinking about the tiles you're taking, you might take some for interesting actions and others to bolster the actions you already have. This sounds very interesting, and I think that the game flow and game pace of this is going to be something that's going to keep you coming back. So I am curious to see if this is going to be enough to make it stand out past Hallertau. Hallertau's biggest strength was the cards and the fact that the actions were so varied and interesting, lots of mini objectives. In this game, the objective is to utilize the best you can the things you already have. You're not chasing new things and adapting a strategy to fit these new objectives. So I hope that this one is still a lot of fun, and I hope that the actions remain interesting without becoming something that's a little bit repetitive, just doing the same thing at smaller incremental rates. Hopefully it was great, but I really like the theme, and the fact that there's a bad action phase is super fun. The next game here is not a game, but an expansion. This is another Uwe Rosenberg expansion. This is for Caverna. So Caverna is releasing their new expansion, the Frantic Fiends. And this has you playing the cave farming game, the dwarf version of Agricola, and you're going to be repelling these terrible fiends from attacking your area. This, unfortunately, is not compatible with the original Caverna, which is really sad. Sorry, not with the original Caverna, but with the original Caverna expansion, which is really sad. But I think that it offers a lot in its package. So the way that the expansion works is you are going to be putting these giant orcs on top of your boards. And every turn, there's going to be ways that they move into your boards and they start plucking stuff off. They can take your animals, they can destroy certain things, they can stop things from working. But as the dwarf, you can repel them. So you can use your weapons on your dwarves to fight them back. You can actually use the dogs to do this, which I think is great. There's more utility for the dogs. And then you also can make trades with them in order to appease them. There's also ways that you can convince the orcs to become part of your family, which will allow them to stay in your area, and you can use them as workers. And I think that's so cool. The fact it reminds me a lot of the little goblins from the original expansion, where you could get those tiny workers that weren't just weren't as efficient. So I'm curious to see if the orcs are stronger here, or maybe they have an effect where they can like push out the other characters if they're blocking spots. I think that sounds super interesting. There's also some changes to the cards in the game, primarily with the ore mining cards. Since the orcs are going to be coming into your land and taking your things, they've made it so that instead of collecting the resources, particularly the ore in front of you, whenever you gain ore, it actually stays in the mine. So that way, if an orc does eventually get into your cave system, it can steal those ore from your cave system. This is so awesome. You're adding this almost like a tower defense style. You could set traps and prepare for the orcs to go in certain directions, but you're never sure exactly where they're going to go. I like this cool randomness that's going to be injected into this pure Euro system. It's something that I'm very interested in. It looks like there's a lot of reward and a lot of interesting consequences that can happen from this. I do think that there should be some way to bring in those variable player powers from the first expansion, but the rules clearly state that some of those factions are going to get wrecked by these orcs and some are going to have a way easier time. So I think I'm glad that they said that straight up, and I think it will be cool to have two different game modes that you can play Caverna as, but this is one that I'm very excited for. And this brings us to my next section. These are new games, but I've kind of played them already. The first one is Clever Forever. If you're unfamiliar, this is a roll and write series that I really like. The whole premise is efficiency and combos. Every turn, you're going to be rolling some dice based off of the Ganshon Clever system. You're going to be rolling some dice, and then with these dice, you're going to be allocating them onto your board. And every time you take a die, it has to be whatever the number is. The numbers that are lower than that, you remove. They're no longer your options for rolls. And then you'll do it again, your second die, and then finally, hopefully, your third die. So you're always pushing your luck on, do I get more options for the future, or do I get a stronger action now? And this simple system works so well for multiplayer and solo, but this is one of my most played solo games ever. The fact that they're releasing one of these every year just makes me super excited, and Clever Forever is just another one in that line. The combo satisfaction of it is lovely. I love figuring out the different puzzles. I like changing between the different games because there's a lot of them now, and so you can just bring a bunch. You can have all these different sheets, or just play one if you're feeling a specific flavor. I really enjoyed Clever Cubed, so I'm curious to see what Clever Forever offers with its different bonus actions and mini games. And seeing as gaming is continuously improving, I can only expect good things from this new expansion. So very excited from that. The next game is another game that I've kind of played, but I'm only familiar with the system, and this is Great Western Trail Argentina. I recently saw the Board Game Ramblings video for this, a very great video. Go check that out. They did a good comparison of the things that made this different to the original Great Western Trail, so if you want more detail, go there. But they compared this to Brass Lancashire versus Brass Birmingham, where they use the same system, but fundamentally the mechanisms are going to be different because of this approach. And I think that's really exciting. So they do keep that core system of you're going to move to a section, you'll use your cards in your hand to take an action, and then it's the next player's turn. I love that system in Great Western Trail. It's one of the things that I think makes it so awesome. The other thing I really enjoy about Great Western Trail is the multi-use nature comes from the buildings and not necessarily the cards in your hand. So by building specific buildings, you're giving more abilities to your deck that you've constructed. And I really like that system. Great Western Trail Argentina, though, offers a new delivery system in the form of boats. And I think that this is going to open the game up just a little bit more and allow the actions to reflect this new delivery system as well. So as you can see, there are boats and there are new sections where you can make deliveries and goods. And so you could do what's essentially a double delivery. I don't know too much on the detail here, but just changing up that final formula and that final end goal that you're going to be continuously cycling to is something I'm really interested in. I've heard that this is a game that is basically similar in its complexity and weight. And since you know that core system, it's going to be something that you can really appreciate those changes in. So if you haven't played Great Western Trail already, I do strongly recommend it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. But this one here looks like a great evolution with more options, particularly in that end of loop scoring when you make it to the end of your action rondel. So very excited for Great Western Trail Argentina, and I'm just looking forward to all of the new Great Western Trails in general. My next game here is hilarious in title. This is a expansion for Critters at War. This is Flies, Lies, and Supplies. What a great name. I love this. So this is a game that I have played. This is just a new version with new art. And so this is where we get into the official bridge of all the games I actually have played that I can recommend that will be there. So Flies, Lies, and Supplies is the Supplies, Lies, and Supplies. Spies, Lies, and Supplies? Air, Land, and Sea, Spies, Lies, and Supplies from the original Air, Land, and Sea. This is a lane battling game where you're going to be playing these different cards on different sides, and whoever has the most strength at the end gets a certain amount of points. It's a race to 12. If you win and everybody's played all the cards, you get 6, but you can drop out whenever you like. Lies, Spies, and Supplies is a standalone game, so you don't need anything else to play this, and it actually really does work as a standalone game. This is just a cartoony version, but the original Spies, Lies, and the original Lies, Spies, and Supplies. Spies, Lies, and Supplies. How many times can I say that? This one here has new tokens that you're going to be utilizing, the supply tokens. Some of your cards will generate them, and those supplies will give you additional strength and power to the different lanes that you allocate them. I really like this system because it gives you a lot of flexibility with your cards. You may draw a card that's pretty pitiful in one of the categories, but can generate supplies in other categories. This gives you some great flexibility of where you're placing them and bolstering specific cards in your hand or what you predict your opponent doesn't have, because that card set is so small with each player only getting a third of that deck at a time. So I really like the ability this allows you to predict, but there's also a lot of intrigue and interaction actions in this. You can do a lot of guessing cards in your opponent's hand, so this does reward knowing the deck a little bit. And this also will give you the options to give your opponent's action for a bonus. And I like stuff like that, where your opponent is going to get something, but you get something stronger in return. I like utilizing that and weaponizing that, particularly in a two-player game where that person that you're helping is your only competition. So I enjoy this whole system, and if you haven't tried Air, Land, and Sea yet, I think this is one that you can definitely start with. This one is a little bit more complex, but I think if you enjoy this style of game, this might be something that you start off with first. There is a way to combine the two games into one super game, and I have not tried that myself personally, but it sounds interesting. But I don't know if it's something that I will try in the near future. I think that this game is a great package on its own. That's Air, Land, and Sea. Spies, Lies, and Supplies, or Flies, Lies, and Supplies. Another small card game I have for you that I have played very recently is Marvel Remix. This was one of my most anticipated of Gen Con, actually, and I did finally get to play it, and this game is great. It is Fantasy Realms through and through. It is missing some of the more bombastic scoring that the original Fantasy Realms has, but what it makes up for is the inclusion of a villain deck. So if you're unfamiliar with Fantasy Realms or Marvel Remix, the goal is to create a hand of cards that work well together. Every turn, you're going to be adding a card to your hand and then discarding a card into a face-up discard pile. Once you reach a certain threshold in the discard pile, the game immediately ends and you score your hand. Now, this game in particular has a villain deck that I think is awesome. The way it works is there's two separate decks that you're drawing cards from. One is the hero deck, one's the villain deck, and the villains generally are going to have some crazy restrictions or crazy limitations or ways to get lots of negative points. For example, Hela here gets you minus 20 points unless you have a specific card. Same thing with Abomination. Or Kang starts with negative points, but can give you more for having specific tags in your hand. I think this is awesome, and it makes so much sense in this system because you, as the player, have the agency every turn to draw a card that you know is going to have some ridiculous or some challenging scoring condition. So you get the entire agency on your turn in order to make your game as difficult as you like, or to push your luck for a better scoring hand at the end of the round. I love this. I love this concept. It makes so much sense, and the symbology here in the Marvel version is really easy to follow. Most cards will have these tags on the left, and there are even some cards that will give you special abilities when you decide to discard them or take them from the face-up area, which the original Fantasy Realms did not have. So I think there's some really cool quality of life changes here. The iconography is very easy to read, and when you're holding your hand, you can put them on the left side of your hand, so that's great. And then you also have some more interesting effects and abilities with the effects when you take them from the display or when you place them in the display. And then lastly, that villain deck is really the shining a shining gem here, as you're able to customize your hand and make your game as difficult as you like. The next game here is a game that I've actually come around on recently, and I wanted to make sure I featured it here. This is Resist, the board game. When I initially played this game, I played just the introduction way. It was very random because you were assembling a team of characters that had all abilities that weren't necessarily cohesive. They didn't really work together, and that made the game itself feel way more random than it was, which was really unfortunate. However, after you know how to play this game, immediately start playing with the drafting rules, because that's going to change your entire opinion. So if you're unfamiliar with Resist, this is a deck building game, and the deck building game starts with a draft phase, and this draft phase allows you to assemble your team of Maquis. Maquis are going to have two different sides. They are hidden or they are revealed. Every card has that option to be hidden or revealed. So when you start, you draw two at a time, you make your deck of half of these Maquis, and the other go into a recruitment deck that you could potentially add to your deck later. Then you reveal these missions onto the board, those large cards at the top, and then you'll use your hand of 5 Maquis in order to take down those missions. I love this option at the beginning, particularly in the scenario book, because the scenario book is going to have a set objective for you. And once you complete that objective, you win the entire game. I love this. It's my way to play. I strongly recommend you give this game a go if you're playing with that scenario book. The original game had this really flimsy way where you were going to stop whenever you felt like it. You're pushing for a beat your score, and it wasn't that rewarding for me. In addition, if you played without the draft, your entire deck just was random Maquis. There was no real theme or arc. You weren't picking the powers, or you didn't really have a big say in the abilities and the choice. And that was really frustrating, as you were just dealing with whatever you had, and the game felt way more random than needed. With this draft and mission scenario setup, you are seeing the scenario, you are drafting your deck to complete the scenario, and then once you start playing, you know every single card in your deck, and you feel pretty informed as well as pretty calculated in every action you're taking. You are looking at the different areas on the board. You can pick play styles that you enjoy. And then the kicker here is each of these Maquis has a hidden and a revealed side. And you can use this purple revealed side in order to take some super powerful action. But when you do that, you lose that card forever. It goes into the revealed pile. It doesn't get shuffled back into your deck. I love this option, particularly in the draft mode, because you know the resources that are available to you, the objective that you need done, so you can really pick a specific timing for that to trigger. Plus, you are going towards that specific objective, so you know the timing that it takes to reach that as well, reach that goal. I think this is very smart on this side, and it does one of the best things that I like in games, period. We saw this in, what's the game? Where you're drafting your cards right before you play. Clash of Decks. You saw this in Clash of Decks. You see this in Capital Lux. You see this in Blood Rage, where you are making that initial draft and then seeing how it plays out. And the game time, that draft takes maybe, I would say, like a minute and a half tops. But the game time itself is about 30 minutes. So it's really satisfying to see this longer game plan come to fruition through that initial large drafting session that you take. So I do recommend this game. I recommend it strongly at the it is only a solo game, but the solo player count is awesome. And I do recommend that you play after you learn to play the game. Just start going straight into that scenario book. Do not spend your time with the standard gameplay. I don't think it's as gratifying or as satisfying. It's honestly pushed me off of this for a while. I wasn't going to try it again, but then I started diving into that scenario book and had so much more time with that purposeful drafting and that set, clear objective. So I do recommend this with those scenario books. Amazing game. And then we come on to my last game that I'm talking about that will be available at Essen. It's one that I have played, and I've played a lot of. This is Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. I say this for last because I've talked about this game quite a bit. It is one of my favorites from this year. The storytelling is amazing. You are in this grim, dark fantasy world where these giant creatures are out to kill you. So you're a party of Oathsworn. Think of yourself as something like Witchers. You're here to protect people from these terrible creatures. And so you are doing that while fighting bosses, and you'll have a story that you go along. No spoilers here, but the boss battles are amazing. But one of the things that I love about this game are the characters. The characters are all varied and different, and the action system for the full characters reminds me a lot of one of the games that I wish was better. This is Batman Gotham City Chronicles. So the action system has you using a cube resource management, and then at the start of each turn, you refresh some of those cubes. You can use the cubes to move around. You can use them to activate your different action cards, and you can even use them in conjunction with some of your, I guess it's an action card still, but you can use it to refresh your chances with your hit location decks, not hit location decks. attack modifier decks. So you can use those in conjunction with that to increase your odds, essentially. And I think this is such a solid system. You have a variety of characters that break the genre a little bit in the way that fantasy characters are portrayed. A particular one that I really enjoy is the Huntsman. I love the character that they have these falcon tokens and they send them around the board. I also really like the stances on the blade. That character is really interesting. And then the other cool thing about the characters is if you don't want to control a variety of these larger characters, you can get these smaller companion cards that only have 2 action points each turn, but those actions are super powerful, but also super straightforward. So I really like the system of the character management in this game. The items are also amazing. I feel like I'm just talking about these over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and stop on Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, but another amazing game, one that you need to give a try, particularly if you like that boss battling genre. And if you're at Essen, it is available currently, which is amazing. So those are my top 10 anticipated games for Essen 2022. Which games are you excited for to release this year? Are there any games that I missed here? If you're live with me now, go ahead and leave a comment and I can take a look at some of these before I close up the stream. But I'm curious to hear overall, what games are you most excited for? Once again, the link is in the description of the video. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, we would love that. It really helps the channel out. And for those of you who already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. I'll leave the stream up for a little bit more if anybody has any comments or anything. And then I'll talk about maybe some games that I'm excited to play that are already here. So games that I'm excited about right now. Well, currently I'm on a big Blood on the Clocktower high. I'm enjoying that quite a bit. Other games that I'm playing today, I'm playing Quacks of Quedlinburg with the Alchemist expansion. I have a friend that wants to know how that plays, so I really enjoy that expansion. I think it's very smart, and the way that it's going to encourage you to diversify as well as making there be some more consequences for busting. However, it doesn't necessarily hurt you, it just helps your neighbors. So I like that you're always invested in your neighbors and hoping that they bust just so you get a minor benefit. So I like that system there. Other things that are happening, we have a lot of games that we are getting rid of currently. We've already gotten rid of 4, which is exciting. I won't give any spoilers on my future games that have been cold video, but just looking, I have them over there. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 24 games are leaving our library. Hopefully. There's a couple of there that have been in that sell pile for a while, though, so I might end up donating those, which is kind of sad. I'm selling them for like $5 a piece, too, which is wild with like $30 MSRPs. So we'll see. That's how it goes, though. Eventually, you just get to a point where nobody wants anything, even if you're offering it for like $1. It's insane. Played some Glenmore yesterday. Amazing game. I'm still enjoying it. We're planning a trip to London later this year for Thanksgiving. So I've been playing all of these Scottish-themed games. It's been a lot of fun. Lands of Caledonia and Glenmore and Isle of Skye. Those are some heavy hitters in that genre. If you have any suggestions for games with fun Scottish themes, I'd love to check that out. I'll have to give Glasgow a try because we will be stopping in there, which is super fun. And if you have any recommendations of things to see while we are in Scotland and in the UK in general, I'd love to hear those as well. I'll leave the stream up for probably another minute or so. Other games that I'm excited for. Shipping notification for, not shipping notification, but we've got a bunch of emails from Endless Winter, so that should be here soon, hopefully. I finished playing more Merchant's Cove, and I have come with my decision on that one. I'm going to not back that one at all. Merchant's Cove ended up being a game that felt that I wasn't particularly excited to play any of the characters after playing all of the characters. The copy that I was borrowing, my friend asked me, hey, what was your favorite? I had to really think about it because I was like, I don't know if any of those were particularly awesome. So that was kind of sad. Yeah, so that's kind of sad. But immediately afterwards, I played some Too Many Bones, and I was like, okay, this is the asymmetry that I was craving. Played some Boomer versus, what was his name? One of the new characters from the Blobulus expansion, the Blobulus? It is Blobulus, the creepy scientist. This was one that was completely made of metal, and every time you punched him, if you got enough health down, he'd lose one of his abilities, one of his pieces would fall off. And then when it was his turn, he could potentially reassemble, or he could drop more of his pieces off. It was pretty scary with Boomer in particular, because you had only so many attack dice that if you were the one responsible for dealing that final blow, it was going to permanently get rid of your attack dice. The other thing was I actually lost this battle because of bleed. Boomer does not have a lot of healing, which was super unfortunate. So I was trying to keep all of the enemies at bay that could do those permanent status conditions away from me because I just didn't have the healing. I had the dexterity to move around and avoid them, but unfortunately I couldn't win. It was so close. A well-fought battle. I believe the enemy had like 2 pieces left before I died. So very, very close game night. I really enjoyed that one. We'll go ahead and wrap up the stream. Well, thank you so much for being here and watching. I hope that the information here was something tangible. You can get an idea of how the game's actually played, as opposed to just a overview of art or something. If you're interested in any of these games, I'll leave links in the description below for any that are available right now. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Side Game Strong.